What if doing everything right is actually, exactly what's keeping you broke?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, we all know the standard advice. We've heard it a million
Right.
times. Get good grades, go to a reputable college, secure a job with solid benefits.
Buy a house.
Yeah, buy a house, max out your 401k, and just quietly diversify your mutual funds until you hit 65. It's the default roadmap for the American dream.
The holy grail of middle-class finance.
Exactly. But lately, you look around, and the people following that map to the letter seem to be, well, the most stressed out.
Oh, absolutely. The most over-leveraged.
Right. And the most terrified of, like, a single unexpected medical bill or a corporate restructuring.
Yeah, it's a very fragile way to live.
So today, we are doing a deep dive into a stack of material from a book that takes that universally accepted roadmap, puts it through a shredder, and basically argues that the middle class is participating in a financial system designed to keep them running on a treadmill forever.
What is a bold claim?
Very bold. We are diving deep into the core principles of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Which, I mean, it remains one of the most polarizing and widely read personal finance texts in history. It originally dropped in the late 90s, and what really strikes me reading through these excerpts today is how the economic shifts of the last 2 decades have actually accelerated the author's primary thesis.
Oh, so.
Well, the gap between the financial strategies of the ultra-wealthy and, the middle class, it hasn't just widened. The two groups are essentially playing completely different games.
With completely different rule books.
Exactly. Different rule books entirely.
So the mission for this deep dive is to lay out those two different rule books for you. We want to extract the specific contrarian advice that the text claims the wealthy teach their kids behind closed doors.
The stuff that completely defies conventional Wall Street wisdom.
Right. And more importantly, we need to pressure test these ideas. I mean, the economic landscape of the late 90s is drastically different from today's fast-paced, inflation-heavy, AI-driven American economy.
Yeah, the world has changed.
So we need to figure out if these strategies still hold water or if they're just, provocative theories that sound good on paper.
To do that, we really have to look past the surface-level financial tips. The text demands a fundamental psychological shift.
It's not just about what stocks to pick.
Not at all. It requires you to completely rethink your definitions of risk, of value,
Yeah.
and, honestly, what it actually means to be educated.
Let's start right there with education. Because before we even get to balance sheets or tax structures or any of that, the source material sets up this framing narrative that dictates everything else.
The origin story.
Yeah, the story of two fathers.
Right, so the author frames his financial awakening through the contrasting worldviews of these two men who shaped his childhood in Hawaii. On one side, you have his biological father, who the text refers to as poor dad.
And we should clarify, poor dad is not like uneducated or unsuccessful by normal standards.
Oh, no, not at all. By conventional societal metrics, he's incredibly successful. He's a highly respected academic. He holds advanced degrees from prestigious universities.
The guy's smart.
Very smart. He serves as the head of education for the state of Hawaii. I mean, he is the ultimate institutional man.
He represents the absolute pinnacle of that traditional roadmap we just talked about. He values job security, he believes in climbing the corporate or government ladder, and he truly believes that academic specialization is the key to a good life.
But the narrative reveals this profound disconnect. Despite his massive intellect, his prestigious title, and a seemingly high income, this man struggled financially his entire life.
Always stressed about money.
Always. He lived paycheck to paycheck, constantly worried about job security, and ultimately left behind a legacy of unpaid bills.
Wow.
Yeah. He was highly educated scholastically, but completely illiterate financially.
Which brings in the foil to that character, the rich dad.
Right. Rich Dad is the father of the author's childhood best friend. And by society's standards, he is entirely unqualified to give life advice.
He didn't even finish middle school, right?
Exactly. He dropped out in the 8th grade. He doesn't have an Ivy League pedigree, but he possesses this deep, rigorous understanding of how money moves.
Street smarts, basically.
Street smarts mixed with raw financial intelligence. He operates small businesses, invests in real estate, and eventually becomes one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii. His worldview operates on a completely different axis than poor dad's.
I want to pause on Rich Dad's central critique of the school system because it is incredibly aggressive.
It really is.
The text argues that traditional schools are fundamentally designed to produce good employees, not employers, like We're conditioned to think that going to law school or getting a medical degree or an MBA is the path to wealth.
Right.
But the author suggests that these institutions are just training people to be, well, highly functioning cogs in someone else's machine.
Yeah, and if you look at the historical context of the American public education system, it makes sense. It was largely formalized during the industrial age.
The factory era.
Exactly. The primary goal was to take an agrarian population and train them to work in factories. They needed punctuality, obedience to authority, and the ability to perform specialized tasks repeatedly.
Without asking too many questions.
Right, without questioning the overarching system. The text argues that this core DNA remains in our schools today. The system is incredibly efficient at teaching you a profession. You know, how to be an engineer, an
Yeah.
accountant, a developer. But it deliberately avoids teaching you the mechanics of capital.
Because, I mean, a population that understands capital doesn't willingly clock in for 40 hours a week to build someone else's equity.
Precisely. And the psychology driving that traditional education model is fear. It starts so early. The fear of getting a bad grade, the fear of not getting into the right college.
The fear of not getting the right job.
Yes, you are conditioned from day one to avoid mistakes at all costs.
Which is the exact opposite of how entrepreneurship works.
Exactly. In the real world of business and investing, making mistakes and analyzing them is the primary mechanism for learning. But by punishing mistakes so harshly, the school system paralyzes people. It breeds a workforce that just craves safety and predictability.
Let's bring this into the context of, like, the modern tech sector in the U.S. Think about the massive waves of tech layoffs we've witnessed over the last few years.
Oh yeah, the Silicon Valley bloodbath.
Right. You have these senior software engineers pulling down $300, maybe $400,000 a year. They have the degrees from Stanford or MIT. They are the ultimate A students.
They did everything poor dad told them to do.
Literally everything. But the second a CEO decides they need to restructure to appease Wall Street, or the second an AI model proves it can write baseline code, boom, that six-figure salary vanishes overnight.
And that scenario perfectly illustrates the fragility of the poor dad model. Those engineers, they have a very high income, but they are incredibly vulnerable.
Because it's a single point of failure.
Exactly. They are entirely dependent on a single source of income, their W-2 paycheck. If their specialized skill is suddenly devalued by the market, or if their employer just pivots, they have nothing to fall back on.
Because they traded time for money.
Right, and time is a finite resource. Rich Dad's core philosophy is encapsulated in this one single mantra: I don't work for money, money works for me.
Okay, it sounds like a great bumper sticker, but practically speaking, what does that actually mean? Like, if I am that software engineer listening to this on my commute right now, how do I stop working for money?
Well, it requires a major shift from focusing on your income statement to focusing on your balance sheet. And that transition brings us to the foundational principle of the entire text.
Rule number one.
Rule number one. It's the only rule you really need to understand to change your financial trajectory. You must know the difference between an asset and a liability, and you must spend your life buying assets.
Okay, I can almost hear the finance majors rolling their eyes right now. The difference between an asset and a liability is literally accounting 101.
It is, but the text explicitly throws out generally accepted accounting principles.
Really? Why?
Because it argues that the way bankers and accountants define these terms is actually designed to confuse the average person and keep them trapped.
The whole sophisticated bean counter thing?
Yeah, the financial industry loves complexity because complexity justifies their fees. Rich Dad believed in the KISS principle, keep it super simple. He stripped away all the jargon and focused purely on the visual flow of cash.
Okay, so how does he define them?
According to the text, an asset is simply something that puts money into your pocket, whether you work or not. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. That's it. That is the entire litmus test.
Does it feed you or does it bleed you?
That is the perfect way to phrase it. If you lose your job tomorrow, an asset will continue to put money into your bank account. A liability will continue to drain it.
So simple.
But profound. The fundamental tragedy of the middle class, according to the text, is that they constantly buy liabilities that they have been tricked into believing are assets.
Let's walk through the mechanics of this, because the book relies heavily on these simple diagram flows. You have your income statement, which is just money coming in and money going out, right?
Right. Income and expenses.
And you have your balance sheet, which lists your assets and your liabilities. So the wealthy focus relentlessly on the asset column. They acquire real estate that pays monthly rent, dividend-producing stocks, intellectual property, maybe automated businesses.
And the cash flow from those assets flows upward into their income statement. They don't have to clock in for it.
Contrast that with the cash flow pattern of the middle class, which creates this phenomenon the text refers to as the rat race. Let's trace the financial life of a typical college graduate today in America.
Okay, let's do it.
They get their degree and land a solid entry-level job. Their income goes up. But what happens almost immediately?
The lifestyle creep begins.
Instantly. Society expects them to look the part. They move out of the cheap college housing with roommates and lease a nicer apartment downtown.
They finance a reliable car to commute to the new job.
They buy a professional wardrobe. They start going to nicer restaurants.
So their income went up, but their expenses rose in exact proportion. Then, a few years later, they get promoted. Maybe they get married, creating a dual-income household.
Now they're making real money.
Right. So what is the immediate cultural impulse?
Time to buy the dream home.
Exactly. Time to buy the house. So they take on a massive mortgage. And a bigger house requires more furniture. It requires higher property taxes, more expensive utilities, constant maintenance. They might have a kid, which adds childcare costs.
You know, I think of the modern middle-class financial life as running on a treadmill where someone else controls the speed dial.
That's a great analogy.
Or maybe it's like the modern software as a service model, right? You get a massive bonus at work, but instead of keeping that capital and investing it, you immediately use it to sign up for higher monthly subscription fees to your own life.
Yes. You lease the luxury SUV, you upgrade the house, you join the nicer gym.
Your top-line revenue went up, but your monthly burn rate went up just as fast. The hole in your bucket just got wider. You were running faster on the treadmill, but you haven't moved an inch forward.
And the hidden mechanism accelerating that treadmill is bracket creep.
Oh, explain that.
As this couple earns more money, the government actually takes a larger percentage of it in taxes. So they are working harder, but the government is taking more, the bank is taking more for the mortgage and the car loans, and the credit card companies are taking more in interest.
It's just a constant bleed.
Right. Their liabilities column is swelling, and the only way to sustain those liabilities is to desperately cling to that W-2 job. They have inadvertently engineered their own imprisonment.
Which really begs the question, why? I mean, why do highly intelligent, capable people consistently build this trap for themselves?
Because the entire economic ecosystem is designed to encourage it. When you walk into a bank for a loan, the loan officer points to your car and your primary residence and calls them assets.
Right. They look at your net worth and include your house.
Exactly. And the banker isn't lying, but they are omitting a crucial detail. Those items are assets for the bank, not for you.
Ah, because of the interest payments.
Yes. Your mortgage is putting cash into the bank's pocket every single month in the form of interest. By redefining an asset strictly by cash flow, does it put money in my pocket today? The text empowers the average person to look at their life objectively. It strips away the illusion of wealth.
I really want to push on that specific point because this is where the text makes its most controversial, truly incendiary claim. If we are defining assets strictly by cash flow, we have to talk about the sacred cow of the American dream.
Here we go.
The text explicitly states that your primary residence is a liability.
It does. And this is the concept that causes people to literally throw the book across the room.
I don't blame them. We are conditioned from birth to believe that buying a house is the ultimate financial achievement and the primary vehicle for building wealth in this country.
We are. It's ingrained in us.
So I'm going to play the skeptic here because my parents bought their home in the suburbs for like $150,000 30 years ago, and today it's worth $800,000.
Okay.
For millions of Americans, a 30-year fixed mortgage acts as a forced savings account. Without that mortgage payment hanging over their heads, they wouldn't be investing that money in cash-flowing businesses. They'd be spending it on vacations and depreciating consumer goods.
That's a fair point about human behavior.
Right. So how can you possibly argue that a house is a liability when it historically appreciates in value?
Well, let's analyze the math rather than the emotion. The author's argument is rooted in rule number 1. Does the house put money in your pocket every month, or does it take money out?
It takes it out.
Right. Even if the property appreciates over 30 years, it is bleeding cash every single day you live in it. You are paying the mortgage, the property taxes, insurance, HOA fees, maintenance.
If the roof leaks, you pay for it.
If the HVAC dies in the middle of summer, you pay for it.
But you get that money back when you sell it, eventually.
Do you? If you calculate 30 years of compounding mortgage interest, property taxes, inflation, and all the unrecoverable maintenance costs, the actual net return on a primary residence is often negligible or even negative.
Wow, when you factor in inflation and interest.
Yeah, but the text goes deeper than just the raw math of the house itself. It outlines 3 specific hidden opportunity costs penalties that occur when you treat your primary residence as your primary investment vehicle.
Okay, what are those 3 hidden losses?
The first is the loss of time. When you tie up your down payment and commit to 30 years of heavy monthly cash outflows, that capital is frozen.
It's trapped in the drywall.
Exactly. It cannot be deployed into true assets like starting a business or building a portfolio of dividend stocks or buying a multifamily rental property that could be compounding and generating passive cash flow during those same 3 decades.
That makes sense. What's the second loss?
The second is the loss of capital. A house is a physical structure that constantly degrades. Money that could have been invested in a startup or an S&P 500 index fund is instead routinely diverted to fix a cracked foundation or replace aging plumbing.
Just to keep it at its baseline value.
Right. You're continuously sinking fresh capital into maintaining a liability just so it doesn't fall down.
And the third loss?
The third is perhaps the most devastating long-term, the loss of education.
How does buying a house lose you education?
Because the middle class pours all their available liquidity into their primary residence and their 401k, they rarely have discretionary capital left over.
Yeah.
And without spare capital, they never actually practice investing.
They don't get the reps in.
Exactly. They never learn how to evaluate a real estate deal or how to analyze a small business acquisition or how to read market trends because they don't actively invest. They never develop financial intelligence. They remain unsophisticated investors, which means they are forever locked out of the best opportunities.
Look, I understand the opportunity cost argument. It's mathematically sound, but people need a place to live. Is the author genuinely suggesting we all rent tiny apartments for our entire lives and never buy a home?
No, and this is a huge common misinterpretation of the text. The author is not saying you shouldn't buy a house. He is saying you shouldn't lie to yourself and call it an asset.
Just call it what it is.
Right. It is a lifestyle choice. It is an expense. The strategy of the wealthy isn't to live in a tent. The strategy is about the sequence of acquisition.
The sequence. Okay, explain that.
The middle class buys the luxury, the big house first, using debt. They then spend the next 30 years using their physical labor, their W-2 income, to pay off that debt.
Working for the house.
Yes. The wealthy flip the sequence entirely. They focus all their initial energy and capital on acquiring cash-flowing assets first. Like they buy a duplex and rent it out. They build a profitable side business. They build a robust stock portfolio. And once the passive income generated by those assets is large enough to cover the monthly expenses of the dream home, then they buy the home.
The assets buy the liabilities.
Precisely. You don't use your sweat equity to buy your house. You use your sweat equity to buy an asset, and the asset pays for the house.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
It is. If you look back in the 2008 financial crisis, the people who were wiped out were the ones who treated their primary residences as ATMs. They assumed a liability was an asset because the paper value was artificially inflating.
And when the music stopped.
When the music stopped, they were trapped with massive monthly cash outflows and zero passive cash inflows.
So if the core strategy is to stop pouring all our money into liabilities disguised as assets, we have to transition to the actual mechanics of building wealth. How do we build this asset column?
Well, the text introduces a concept called minding your own business.
And to grasp this, we have to make a very sharp distinction between a profession and a business, right?
Yes. This is a semantic difference that has massive financial implications. Most people use the terms interchangeably. If you ask a bank manager what their business is, they will say, "Oh, I'm in the banking business."
But they aren't.
No, they are in the banking profession.
They don't own the bank, they just work there.
Right. Your profession is what you do to generate earned income. It is how you trade your time for a paycheck to survive. Your business, however, is your asset column. The text points out that most of the middle class spends their entire lives minding someone else's business.
You work 40 hours a week to make the company shareholders wealthy.
Yep.
You pay a third of your income in taxes to fund the government's business. You pay the rest to the bank to fund their mortgage business. You are a highly efficient engine generating wealth for literally every entity on Earth except yourself.
It's brutal when you frame it that way, but it's true. To achieve financial freedom, you have to start minding your own business. You have to divert your focus, your energy, and your excess cash away from your employer's bottom line and towards your own asset column.
There is a brilliant case study in the text involving Ray Kroc, the man who built the McDonald's empire. It perfectly illustrates this difference between a profession and a business.
Oh, the UT Austin story.
Yeah. So Kroc was speaking to a group of MBA students at the University of Texas, and he asked them this simple question: what business am I in?
And naturally, the students laughed. They assumed it was a joke. They said, Ray, everyone knows you're in the hamburger business.
But Kroc corrected them. He said, ladies and gentlemen, I am not in the hamburger business. My business is real estate.
It is the ultimate real-world application of this concept. The profession of McDonald's, the operational activity that generates the daily cash flow, is selling mediocre hamburgers.
Flipping the burgers.
Right. But the true business of McDonald's, the underlying asset column that generates the vast majority of their corporate wealth, is the commercial real estate beneath those fryers.
It's genius.
McDonald's is one of the largest single owners of real estate in the world. They secure the most valuable intersections in every town, and the franchisee who works 80 hours a week selling the burgers is effectively just paying the mortgage on that prime real estate.
So for the listeners sitting in traffic right now, commuting to their corporate job, how do they practically apply the Ray Kroc strategy? The text obviously isn't suggesting they quit their job tomorrow and try to buy $1 million commercial property.
Actually, the text explicitly advises against quitting your day job immediately.
Oh, really? Keep the job.
Yes, keep your profession, use it to feed yourself and pay your bills, but you must ruthlessly direct your excess capital and your excess time toward building your business, your asset column.
So instead of getting a raise and buying a new boat,
You take that extra capital and buy fractional shares in a profitable company. Or instead of spending your weekends binge-watching Netflix, you use that time to build a digital product, or start a consulting LLC, or research a small multifamily property.
you mentioned an LLC, which brings us to a really critical part of the text. When you transition from just having a profession to actually building a business, you unlock a completely different set of rules regarding how the government treats your money.
The tax codes.
Right. We have to talk about taxes and how the corporate structure acts as a legal shield.
This is where the game truly reveals itself to be asymmetrical. The rules of taxation for an employee are fundamentally different from the rules of taxation for a business owner.
Walk us through it.
Let's trace the path of a single dollar earned by an employee. The employee earns the dollar, but before they even see it, the government takes its cut. The taxes are withheld at the source.
You literally never touch that money.
Exactly. The employee receives whatever's left over, the net income, and they have to use that diminished amount to pay for their life, their car, their internet, their travel.
The timeline is earn, get taxed, spend what's left.
Now, trace a dollar earned by a corporation or an LLC. The business earns the dollar, but before the government touches it, the business is legally allowed to spend that pre-tax dollar on legitimate expenses required to generate that income.
Like what kind of expenses?
A portion of the internet bill, a portion of the cell phone, business travel, client dinners, sometimes even vehicles or health insurance. The business spends everything it legally can, and it is only taxed on the net profit that remains at the very end.
The timeline is earn, spend everything you legally can, and get taxed on the scraps. That is a massive mathematical advantage.
It is the primary reason the wealthy use corporate structures. And let's be clear, it isn't illegal tax evasion. It is legally utilizing the tax code as it is written.
The government actually wants you to do this.
Yes. The government uses the tax code to incentivize behavior. They want people to build businesses, provide housing, and create jobs, so they offer tax advantages to the people who do those things. Employees are not incentivized. They're simply taxed to fund the system.
Wow.
By starting your own business, even just a small side hustle LLC, you move yourself into a much more advantageous legal and tax position.
Okay, so the strategy is to keep the day job, keep the profession, but aggressively mind your own business by acquiring assets. You use the cash flow from your profession to fund your asset column until your asset column generates enough passive income to fund your life.
And when that crossover point happens, when your passive income exceeds your monthly expenses, you have officially escaped the rat race. You no longer work because you have to. You work because you choose to.
To make that leap, you really have to understand the different playing fields of the economy. You have to know where you are standing today and where you need to move. Which brings us to a conceptual framework that the author is incredibly famous for, the cash flow quadrant.
The cash flow quadrant is a brilliant mental model. It categorizes the working world into 4 distinct groups based on how they generate their income. Imagine a cross creating 4 quadrants.
Okay, on the top left, we have the E quadrant, which stands for employee. On the bottom left, the S quadrant, which stands for self-employed or small business owner. On the top right, the B quadrant for big business owner. And on the bottom right, the I quadrant for investor.
What makes this framework so powerful is that it doesn't just describe tax brackets. It describes deeply ingrained psychological profiles.
Or so.
The people in these different quadrants value entirely different things. Let's start with the left side, the E and the S. The defining characteristic of the left side is that they trade their time for money, and their primary psychological driver is the desire for security.
Let's analyze the E, the employee.
The employee values certainty above all else. They want a predictable salary, guaranteed benefits, a clear job description. They are terrified of financial volatility.
And when they face a financial problem, their default solution is to just find a better, higher paying, more secure job.
Right. They just want a better E position. Now, below them is the S, the self-employed. This could be a freelance graphic designer, a local plumber, a real estate agent, or even a highly paid surgeon.
I read this part of the text and it felt like a gut punch, to be honest.
Why is that?
Because the trap of the S quadrant is that you think you own a business, but in reality, you just own a job.
Oh, absolutely. It is the most exhausting quadrant to be in. The S values independence, but they are often perfectionists. Their core belief is, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself.
They don't delegate.
They don't trust others to manage the work as well as they do. Let's take the example of a successful dentist. They might make $500,000 a year. They feel wealthy. But if that dentist breaks their hand or simply wants to take a 6-month sabbatical, their income instantly drops to 0.
Because they are the engine.
The revenue is 100% reliant on their physical presence and their personal labor. They bear all the risk of an entrepreneur, but they have 0 leverage.
So the left side trades time for money, driven by security and independence. What about the right side?
The right side, the B and the I, operates on a completely different paradigm. They value freedom. They do not want their income tied to their physical labor.
So how does a B, a business owner, differ from an S?
An S wants to be the smartest person in the room. A B wants to surround themselves with people who are smarter than they are.
A B doesn't build a job. A B builds a system.
Exactly. Henry Ford is a classic example in business history. Ford didn't know how to build a V8 engine himself.
Right, he had engineers for that.
He built a system of specialists who knew how to do it. A true B quadrant business owner can leave their company for a year, travel the world, and come back to find the business more profitable than when they left. They use OPM other people's money and OPT other people's time to generate wealth.
And finally, the bottom right, the I quadrant, the investor.
This is the ultimate destination in the text's philosophy. In the I quadrant, you aren't managing employees or building corporate systems. You are purely managing capital. Money makes money. Your wealth is entirely decoupled from your time.
The ultimate goal is to migrate from the left side of the quadrant, where you are highly taxed and bound to your labor, to the right side, where you enjoy the lowest tax burdens and infinite leverage. But I want to tie this back to the modern American economy, because the text makes a chilling observation about the illusion of security in the E quadrant.
Oh, regarding job security.
Yes. The author points out that the traditional concept of job security is an artifact of the industrial age. It literally no longer exists.
It really doesn't. Think about previous generations. Maybe your grandfather worked in manufacturing. He had a defined benefit pension.
Great. He gave the company 40 years of labor, and the company guaranteed him a set income until the day he died.
The company bore the risk of the market. But today, that system is dead. It has been completely replaced by the 401k, which is a defined contribution plan.
Which was a massive silent transfer of risk.
Huge. Corporations shifted the burden of market volatility and longevity risk entirely onto the shoulders of the employee. You are now responsible for managing your own retirement funds in a complex global market, usually with 0 financial education.
And Social Security is facing severe demographic headwinds. The safety nets are disappearing. So if you are an E, relying entirely on a corporation and the government for your future security, you are actually in the most precarious, high-risk position possible.
It's terrifying when you realize it. True security isn't a guaranteed salary, True security is owning assets that produce cash flow regardless of whether the economy is booming or in a recession.
Which brings us to the most perplexing question of the entire analysis. If the mechanics of moving from the left side to the right side are this simple, spend less than you earn, buy cash flowing assets, use corporate structures, build systems, why isn't everyone wealthy?
Right. The math isn't calculus, it's basic arithmetic.
Exactly. So what's stopping them?
The text argues that the barrier isn't mathematical, it's psychological. Even when people become financially literate, they are paralyzed by internal roadblocks.
Yeah.
The author identifies 5 specific psychological traps that keep intelligent people stuck in the rat race: fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance.
Let's break these down because this is where the theory hits the reality of human nature. Let's start with the most pervasive roadblock: fear.
Specifically, the profound, paralyzing fear of losing money. The author admits he has never met anyone who enjoys losing money. The difference between a rich person and a poor person isn't the absence of fear, it is how they manage it.
So how does the middle class manage financial fear?
They try to eliminate it entirely by playing it perfectly safe. They go to a financial planner and they demand a balanced portfolio.
Right. Spread it all out.
They spread their limited capital across low-yield bonds, certificates of deposit, and broad mutual funds. It is a defensive strategy designed primarily not to lose. But a strategy designed not to lose is rarely a strategy that wins big.
I have to challenge this because you are touching the third rail of modern investing advice here.
I know.
The golden rule of modern finance is diversification. Warren Buffett, perhaps the greatest capital allocator in history, routinely advises the average person to simply buy a low-cost S&P 500 index fund, dollar-cost average into it, and ignore the market. Is the author genuinely suggesting that average people should abandon diversification and take concentrated risks? Because that sounds incredibly irresponsible.
It's a critical debate, and we have to synthesize what the text is actually advocating.
Yeah.
The author argues that if you have very little capital and your goal is to become rich, you must focus, not balance.
Focus.
Yes. Balanced people stay in one spot. Think about the physics of walking. To move forward, you must temporarily lose your balance.
You literally have to lean into the fall.
Exactly. If you look at the origins of almost any massive fortune, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, or even Warren Buffett in his early partnership days, they did not build their initial wealth through extreme diversification. They took massive concentrated risks in areas where they had deep, specialized knowledge. They put all their eggs in one basket, and then they watched that basket intensely.
So the distinction is focus to get rich, diversify to stay rich.
Yes, exactly. Diversification is a phenomenal tool for wealth preservation. Once you have $10 million, you diversify to ensure you never go broke. But if you are a young professional with $5,000 to your name and you spread that across 500 companies to avoid volatility, you are mathematically guaranteeing mediocre returns.
You're just matching inflation, basically.
Right. The text argues that avoiding risk is impossible. You must learn to manage risk through financial intelligence and deep due diligence.
Which leads directly to the second roadblock: cynicism. The text has this fantastic line: cynics criticize and winners analyze.
Cynicism is just fear disguising itself as intelligence. It's the voice in your head or the voice of your friends at a dinner party saying, oh, the market is too high right now, or if real estate is such a good idea, why isn't everyone doing it?
Or the economy is about to collapse.
Right. It's the Chicken Little mentality. The sky is always falling.
And what is the result of that mentality?
The cynic stays on the sidelines, paralyzed by their own sophisticated doubts. But the winner analyzes. When the market dips, the cynic panics, but the winner sees assets on sale. The real world is constantly offering opportunities, but cynicism blinds you to them.
The third roadblock is laziness. But the text frames this in a very counterintuitive way. It's not physical laziness. It's not someone sleeping on the couch all day playing video games.
No, it's mental laziness disguised as being too busy.
Oh, I know so many people like this.
We all do. They are incredibly busy. They work 60 hours a week. They shuttle their kids to endless activities. They're constantly answering emails. They use their busyness as an excuse to avoid doing the hard mental work of analyzing their finances.
I just don't have time to look at my portfolio.
Exactly. Or when confronted with an investment opportunity, their default response is, I can't afford it.
I can't afford it is a statement. It just shuts down the brain completely.
Right. It requires 0 mental calories to say, I can't afford it. The author suggests replacing that statement with a question, how can I afford it?
That is powerful.
That simple linguistic shift forces your brain to start working. It forces you to get creative, to look for solutions, to find ways to generate more capital or structure a deal. The text actually argues that a little bit of greed-like, a healthy desire to improve your life, is the antidote to mental laziness.
That brings us to the fourth roadblock, bad habits. And this is where the author introduces his most practical, yet kind of terrifying daily action step. It's a concept borrowed from the classic book The Richest Man in Babylon, but Kiyosaki weaponizes it. The concept is pay yourself first.
Most people fundamentally misunderstand this phrase.
They really do. They think paying yourself first means taking a portion of your paycheck and treating yourself to a nice dinner or a new pair of shoes before paying the bills.
They treat it like a consumer reward. Treat yourself.
Exactly. But in the context of building an asset column, pay yourself first is an aggressive, high-stakes accounting maneuver.
Very high stakes.
It means that the moment money hits your bank account, before you pay the mortgage, before you pay the utility company, and before you pay the IRS, you allocate a fixed percentage of that capital directly into your asset column.
You buy the stock, or fund the business, or save for the real estate down payment first.
Okay, let's play this out in reality. What happens if I pay my asset column first, and I look at the remaining balance, and I just don't have enough cash left over to pay my credit card bill or my taxes?
The text addresses this exact scenario, and the answer is radical. Rich Dad would still pay his asset column first and let the creditors howl.
Vote them out.
He intentionally used the immense psychological pressure of looming bills and angry creditors to force himself to hustle.
He literally weaponized his own fear.
Precisely. If you pay everyone else first and tell yourself, oh, I'll invest whatever's left over at the end of the month, there is never anything left over. Parkinson's law dictates that expenses will always rise to match income. There is no pressure to innovate.
Because everyone else is satisfied.
Right. But if you pay yourself first and you are suddenly short on rent, the sheer terror of eviction will inspire financial genius. It forces you to find a side hustle, to close another sale, to figure out a new revenue stream. Paying yourself first is the ultimate declaration that building your business is more important than funding someone else's.
That is intense. And the final roadblock is arrogance. The text defines arrogance simply as ego plus ignorance.
The author notes that every time he has lost money in his life, it was because he was arrogant enough to believe that what he didn't know wasn't important.
The financial industry is full of people using arrogance to mask their lack of fundamental understanding.
It really is. When you encounter a topic you don't understand, whether it's crypto or a new tax law or real estate syndication, the arrogant response is to just dismiss it as a scam. The intelligent response is to admit your ignorance and start reading.
We have covered an immense landscape of theory and application today. We started by dismantling the poor dad philosophy of education, revealing how schools train us to be obedient employees rather than sophisticated capital allocators.
We redefined assets and liabilities through the lens of cash flow, identifying how the middle class traps itself in the rat race by financing lifestyle creep.
We confronted the painful reality that a primary residence is a cash-draining liability, and that true wealth requires building an asset column that buys your luxuries for you.
We analyzed the difference between a profession and a business, using Ray Kroc to illustrate how the wealthy build systems and use the corporate tax code as a legal shield.
We navigated the cash flow quadrant, moving from the security-driven left side to the freedom-driven right side.
And finally, we unpacked the psychological roadblocks. The fear of losing, the paralysis of cynicism, the mental laziness of I can't afford it, the necessity of paying yourself first, and the danger of arrogance.
The ultimate takeaway for the listener is a profound shift in how you measure your own success. We are taught to measure success by our W-2 salary or the square footage of our home, but the text borrows a different, much more brutal definition of wealth from the inventor Buckminster Fuller.
I love this definition. Fuller said that wealth is not a dollar amount. Wealth is a person's ability to survive so many number of days forward.
It is the ultimate test of your asset column. If you were to stop working today, if you were laid off tomorrow morning and could never trade your time for money again, how long could you maintain your current standard of living using only the cash flow from your assets?
For most Americans, the answer is a few weeks, maybe a few months if they completely drain their savings. They might have high incomes, but they possess zero actual wealth.
Your answer to that question is your true net worth. We started today by talking about the standard American roadmap. That old map taught you how to build a comfortable cage.
A very comfortable cage, but a cage nonetheless.
The principles we analyze today, acquiring cash flowing assets, understanding tax advantages, and overcoming the psychological fear of the market, are the tools required to dismantle that cage. It takes longer to build your own system. It requires unlearning decades of societal conditioning. But once that asset column is built, it can weather any economic storm. Keep questioning the default path, keep analyzing the systems around you, and start minding your own business. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.